everyone. Thank you. Welcome and thank you for joining. My name is Melanie and I'm the director of Reclaim the Frame, pronouns she, her, and it's my privilege to be hosting this evening's Awards Nominees Roundtable. Just to self-describe, I am a woman, early 40s, white, blonde hair, short, sharp fringe, dark top, grey necklace, and I put lipstick on for the occasion. We're really pleased to be hosting this virtual roundtable. It's something we've done every year for a few years now, with some of the nominees up for this year's Oscars and BAFTAs. And it's a really, really stellar year. So yeah, I can't wait to introduce you to some of this evening's speakers. I just want to start by saying a little bit about what Reclaim the Frame does. We're a charity with a mission to champion gender equity in all film spaces. And this evening is actually really special for us because tomorrow we're going to be launching our programme celebrating our 20th anniversary as an organisation. We started out as Bird's Eye View Film Festival 20 years ago, with the same mission, and we're still going, now called Reclaim the Frame, but UK-wide, year-round, and we'll be celebrating with a weekender of screenings and events on International Women's Day, and over that weekend, as I say, we launch the programme tomorrow. But back to this evening, we're thrilled to be chatting with some of the nominees of this year's BAFTA and Oscar nominated features. So I want to introduce, please, first, we're going to start with Angela Patton and Natalie Ray, directors of Daughters, which is BAFTA nominated for documentary. I want to welcome now Andrea Cornwell, who is the producer of Love Lies Bleeding, which is BAFTA nominated for Outstanding British Film. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, good evening.
Next up, we've got Lena Langebek Knudsen, who is the writer of The Girl with the Needle, which is Oscar nominated for Best International Feature Film. Hi, Lena.
Hello, everyone.
We've got Moina Fastvold, co-writer and producer of The Brutalist, Oscar nominated for Best Original Screenplay and Best Picture, and BAFTA nominated for Original Screenplay and Best Film. Welcome, Moina. And Paula DuPré Pesmen, who is joining us as the producer and co-writer of Porcelain War, Oscar nominated for Best Documentary Feature. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And again, you can see on screen, thank you to our captioners, Joanne and Norma. So I'm going to start with Daughters. Angela and Natalie, congratulations on what I understand has been an 8-year journey. Your awards at Sundance, Critics' Choice, and now BAFTA nomination. Well, tell us first a bit about what it's about, but my questions are really about how it was that you gained the access that you did, and also, you know, as a film that's about fathers and daughters, how you gained the trust of your contributors.
Yes, well, that's we both can tag team on that. So gaining access wasn't challenging when it was time to actually film, because I am the founder of Girls for a Change and the CEO. And this was probably like the 13th or 14th Date with Dad program, which is what you see in the film Daughters that I have done in our community. And so fortunately, when Natalie approached me to become a co-director on this film and asked if I ever thought about actually making a doc around this initiative in my city, you know, the trust was already there with the community. So we were very fortunate there. However, unfortunately, the actual jail that I had the trust with lost the sheriff that I had the relationship with, and we were on pause for a while. And fortunately, Washington, D.C. jail said, like, Natalie, I saw your TED Talk and we would love to replicate the same model. And so when they asked if I could bring the program, I asked if they would allow us to also continue our filming in their facility. And because I had the blessings of another sheriff from that relationship, they trusted him, met with us, built the trust with us, and then a relationship blossomed from there, not only with the facility and their staff, but also families within the community. And I let Natalie share how the families got involved and built that relationship and trust with us as well.
Yeah, it was incredible hearing Angela's TED Talk, at the beginning, and just this moment where a girl wanted to connect with her father, and through all the, her own pain and frustration and anger, all those emotions that that child was going through, the idea that she wanted to actually celebrate her father and throw a dance, let's have a party, let's celebrate. Like, how beautiful is that, that a child has the wisdom to meet her father in that kind of energy and with that kind of separation. So I thought that was so profound. And so it was really a lot of learning for me. It took us those 3 years to kind of get one of the programs fully greenlit to film. And then it was really just going to DC and meeting the moms and the girls and the fathers, and really understanding why they might want to be part of a film like this, what they felt like the world doesn't know about some of the ripple effects that go on when you have an incarcerated member of the family and all the other stuff that is burdens that are put on the family. So I think that a lot of the ideas started generating actually from the moms and the stuff that they wanted to share. So those early meetings and conversations really set the groundwork for the trust and the type of relationship we were going to have moving forward. And we also explained that we wanted this to be really a film that allowed people in a very intimate space and really understanding what these girls were feeling on an emotional level. So we wanted it to be verite and very intimate and have a lot of time kind of hanging out and sitting around the house. And I think the families also resonated with that kind of approach. So then we set off to sit on their bedroom floor for 6 years and see what we could get.
Oh, well, congratulations, because yeah, you really feel that intimacy and that trust in the kind of stories and the kind of vulnerability that they share. But Angela, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your work, and you referenced your TED Talk, but your kind of wider work with what you call Girls at Promise, which I
Yeah.
love, African American girls through Girls for a Change. Tell us a
Yes,
little bit about that.
absolutely. Well, a lot of my work is grounded in social change. When you do programs for young people, then your out of school program, your after school, but I'm for a lifetime. And so when I received this calling to actually show up for Black girls, I understood that it really was my call to action around making sure people see them differently than also when I was a little girl, right? Because I was once a Black young girl as well. And so when I used to read articles about at risk youth, that would tear me up inside because it's already putting some narrative on them that they are only doomed to fail, right? And so I know something different, because I am that young Black girl that saw my family work, to make sure that those same opportunities that they dreamed of were provided for me by making sure that I had access to opportunity. So our mission here at Girls for Change is to prepare Black girls for the world, right? By making sure that they have the tools and the skills and the support and resources, but it's also to prepare the world for Black girls so that they will see that they are at promise and not at risk, and not put into these practices of stereotyping them and these biases and microaggressions that Black girls face every day because of how the world has always depicted them in their lived experiences. So over here at Girls for Change, where I sit today, it's work for all of us to do. to uplift each other as we are uplifting Black girls in my community and abroad. And so this particular story was just one of many where girls were able to identify and affirm things on their own terms around their relationships, specifically with their fathers. But at Girls for a Change, this is something that they're able to voice in the workforce, in their schools, in their communities, about how they want to be seen, heard, and celebrated. And so fortunately, Daughters is one of our many ways of doing that through this film that you can see. But this is a very well-rounded and uplifting Black girls that I work with starting as early as elementary school into their early adulthood years.
Amazing. It's amazing work you do.
Thank you.
Natalie, your background is as a filmmaker, although I believe this is your debut. Maybe if you could just share a little about the kind of collaboration between the two of you in terms of what you both brought to this project.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. I mean, it's been a beautiful personal film project for me as well, because when I was like 6, 7 years old and I was really learning some hard truths about the world, and particularly like endangered species and the environmental crisis. When you're little, that's, you just feel like, oh my God, like why isn't everyone talking about this? And my dad taught me this idea of, social impact filmmaking. And I could, call this number, rent a camera, maybe put a little message together and do something about some of these things. So my dad really helped me become a filmmaker since I was little. And so I made shorts, every couple of years, and a lot of documentary ideas through high school. And then because I was also a dancer, and in music videos was like a creative outlet that really took off for me. So then it was kind of interesting how documentary and my fine arts and the music kind of all were married. When I came across this TED Talk, I was like, wow, this is so impactful, because I think I could see it from so many different layers. That this was a project I knew could be my first feature and invest kind of this amount of time in. So then it's been like 10 years this January that I first emailed Angela. So this is a really amazing time, and so crazy that we're at this place with you all. Yeah.
Yeah, and now the film is on Netflix. So in terms of impact,
Yeah.
it's getting like the widest kind of possible
Hmm.
audience. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Paula, I want to come to you next and talk about Porcelain War. Paula, yeah, so congratulations on your Sundance and Cinema Eye wins and your Oscar nomination. And I wonder if you could share with us about how the project came about. Like, I'm particularly interested in how you supported the artists in the film to tell and film their own stories.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so grateful to be here with these incredible women. It's really an honor. I came to Porcelain War is very different than anything I've worked on in the past. The subjects of the film, the participants, are artists, and they're 9 miles from the fighting line in Russia. And they were working on an animated project prior with the other co-director and other producer in California. And then the war broke out. And so when they checked on them, they found out that they were staying and that they were going to continue to make art, and that Slava, the co-director, had joined the special forces and was also training civilians how to fight. And so we sent the first camera through a volunteer in Poland. She smuggled it into them across Ukraine. And we started these impromptu film classes over Zoom to teach them how to use the camera. They brought their best friend, who's an oil painter, and we weren't sure how that was going to go with different languages. We had a translator. We were 6,000 miles apart, but they started uploading the most beautiful footage, and we were like, "What's going on?" They are not. It's not like what we were expecting with documentary footage. And what they did is they just started creating art with the cameras, and explained to us that they really wanted to show what's beautiful about their country and what's beautiful about the people and what they were fighting for and why it's worth fighting for. And so we really followed them and tried to empower them to tell their own story and really not impose. It's a very intimate experience with them, because they trust each other, and they were just given the freedom to take the camera where they wanted to. and to really humanize war, not just about Ukraine, but just war anywhere. There's people behind it, and it's easy to think that's so far away. That's not us. And really, war for them came to their doorstep, and they just show us how not only are they trying to survive in war, but they actually are living in war, finding beauty, finding time to create art as a form of resistance, and how to really savor each moment, and really how important it is that we all have our uniqueness and our culture, and protecting that is just so important, especially now in the world. You know, democracy and those things are fragile. And I think they really show that for all of us in just a beautiful way.
Thank you. Yeah, and it feels like such a creative collaboration, in that the creativity isn't only the art that they're making and that we see on screen. It feels like, you know, if you're talking about art as a form of resistance, the whole film in itself feels like a really creative and artistic approach to making a film, because I guess because it's first time filmmakers making it who've come from that background, and it's the only film they know to make. But I think yeah, I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about kind of how you supported them, not only to make the film in terms of like the equipment and so on, but how you supported them to make the film that they wanted to make in the way that they wanted to make it.
Yeah, our other producer had not made a film before, and the co-directors had never made a film, as well as the cinematographer. So really, I think my role was to support everybody and help them navigate that path. And really, we just listened. We just tried to listen and learn. And in the collaboration, we would turn on the cameras and we would just start asking questions, and just asking one of the first scenes in the film is me asking them, how did they meet? And that was how we opened the film, with how they met. And also not trying to direct what life was like for them, but just to follow the footage. And each time we'd get footage uploaded, one day it was them in nature, and the next day they're in a training facility, and the next day they're on a mission. So we were really just following what their actual life was like, but then asking questions and helping them expand more. Even an example would be we had a few days with no footage, and we were concerned and checking on them. And they said, oh no, we've had blackouts, so it's just been dark. I'm like, well, people would probably want to see that. So you should probably show us, what is that like to live in a blackout? And so they just continued to be curious and look around and show us what was happening. And then we could, in return, watch the footage, get it from the translators, and then we could have these Zoom calls, which we did several times a week, and continue to ask questions and learn about what was happening next, and really just follow that juxtaposition of what their life was like. And then made that creative decision in the edit room to keep the film the way it was actually being filmed, you know, through that daily juxtaposition, because it's so jarring. It was jarring for us. We'd be on a call and there'd be air raids and blackouts and things happening. And then the next day they were off to Bakhmut, and we were in a race to get them cameras. We ended up sending 15 cameras in, and then all of the unit became a part of our camera team as well. They started wearing body cams and GoPros, and they took drone cameras as well and started filming from all different angles the missions that they were doing. And they all became storytellers too, and taking us on the journey with them. And the creativity of this project was so unique. Even with the animation, you know, they didn't want us to use just war footage, because they said that's boring and it's something that people get used to and they just tune it out. It's disgusting. And so we were able to work with an animation studio, Blue Studios in Poland, and we sent them 20 years of Anya's work and the audio of some of these conversations. And then they were able to use Anya and Slava's language of art to tell the story of their past, the day of the invasion, and their hope for the future. So, and they were on the film with us for a year. So all across the board, everybody was really given space to be creative and collaborate. And when you have a lot of artists that come together, it's beautiful. And they just needed the support of how to get the film together and put it together and what was needed, and really just empower people to to use that creative space. And I think that the film, that it even exists, is a form of resistance, truly. They're brave people, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to continue to maintain their uniqueness and their identity.
And how are they doing? Slava, Anya, Andrea, how are they doing?
Slava and Anya are still traveling with the film, and they're doing okay. Checking in daily with everybody. Andre is still separated from his wife and daughters. They're at safety in Luxembourg, but he hasn't been with his daughters in a year. So it's really painful for him and them to be separated. And they're just one of the thousands of families that are separated. And at the moment, everyone in Slava's unit of Saigon, they are all still okay. They are now defending their home around Kharkiv. They're tired. Everybody's very tired, but they're more than ever determined to protect their homes and their loved ones.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad for this film existing. You know, I love to hear from you, and maybe this is something we'll dig into later, that, you know, that there were learnings for you in this, because Paula, you're, you know, a really seasoned producer. And the fact that there were learnings through this process for you too, is something maybe we can come back to. But yeah, it's such an important film, but also just so creatively told. I know it's had an albeit small but release here in the UK, so hopefully some people got to catch it on the big screen, which is absolutely what this film demands. And congratulations again on the nomination.
Thank you so much.
I want to come to Mona next. Mona, if we could talk about The Brutalist. And I mean, just to start with, huge congratulations on the number of BAFTA and Oscar nominations. I believe it's up for 10 BAFTAs, up for 9 BAFTAs, up for 10 Oscars. And including for you know, nods for the writing. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us to talk about The Brutalist. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel humbled by the incredible women speaking before me. I just made up a story. So, you know, when you hear about the incredible work behind making documentary films, you know, it's humbling, and you wonder why do we sit here cozy in our little office and dream up something. It's quite different.
I mean, maybe it's part of the dreaming up, it's part of the kind of the development, but perhaps something that the other films that were spoken up to now, it also sort of touches on maybe something, a kind of shared area, which is I want to start by asking you about the research. You know, incredible epic. I hear 7 years to make. I mean, I think that's also been a theme similar to Daughters. You know, huge undertaking, so much to talk about. But I wonder if we could, yeah, start by talking about the research that went into the stories of Holocaust survival, of immigration in the 1940s, of brutalism. If we could start there.
Yeah. I mean, I love the themes, obviously, because we spent so many years on them. So we did a tremendous amount of research, or I guess it's just more so than research, it's just being very, you know, obsessively interested in these specific topics. I grew up, my grandfather's an architect, so I grew up with architecture around me and talking about buildings, constructions, of different architectural styles. And I think in particular, both for me and my partner Brady, we were both interested in brutalism, and we were really interested in exploring how post-war psychology affected post-war architecture. And that sort of led us to this story and idea around a Hungarian architect who survives the war and immigrates to America and attempts to rebuild his career and life here in America. At the time, you know, you're just interested in what you're interested in, but as we worked on it and more and more, it became more and more less about architecture in some ways and more a story of an immigrant and the struggles and the that you have to overcome, which is also something quite personal to me. I grew up with my father's immigration lawyer, and he had his office at home, and he only worked with asylum seekers my whole childhood and teenage years. So throughout my upbringing, I always met with asylum seekers, and they became our friends and those family friends throughout my childhood. And hearing so many of those stories and struggles, and then seeing people who come to Norway in the 90s and then reestablish themselves and reinvent their career, and with very impressive backgrounds, but would have to kind of completely rethink what they were going to do or how they were going to do it in a different country. So that was sort of the beginning behind the story. And then, of course, it was interesting to us. You know, we never thought that we would be writing this story. And, you know, we wrote it during Trump's first endeavor. And then, you know, having the film come out now with him returning, which is, of course, it's overwhelming to think about what we're experiencing now, and what our neighbors and friends are experiencing now, and the fear for, you know, our immigrants in America right now. It's very real.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, you know, we see firsthand in the film the how Adrian Brody's character is kind of how he's kind of operating in a second language and the discrimination that he faces. If there's anything else you want to share about kind of, I guess, the kind of message that his character is, yeah, I guess the message that that you want to get across through his character as somebody who is, you know, seeking a kind of freedom in what's supposed to be, you know, the land of the free, but coming from, you know, a survivor from where he's coming from.
Well, I think often, you know, we have seen many times, you know, films and novels that's portraying the American dream, and, you know, Laszlo is a character who escapes fascism only to encounter capitalism, and capitalism is complicated, and it's not so rosy. It's and I think ultimately for me, what was important to explore with Laszlo's story, and what I hope that everyone would take away from that on just a human level, is empathy for a survivor that is not perfect. That is not, I think that very often we have seen portraits of survivors where it's almost as if we think that the audience can't empathize with them unless they're, you know, altruistic, perfect, and incredible, and that somehow because of their trauma, they have become better for it. And I think that that's rarely the case. You push through your trauma and you can still have a great life. And maybe you can see, somebody can see some, you know, glass half full of certain things, but it certainly shouldn't be an expectation that we should only see survivors portrayed in this way. It almost feels grotesque to me. I think that, you know, it was important to show Laszlo, Erzsébet, and Sofia handling their trauma in different ways and being imperfect within their relationship and being complicated within the relationship. Laszlo is a philanderer. He has a big ego and you know, big dreams as well. And Erzsébet is stubborn, and her, you know, we're seeing their relationship and how complicated that is. Was important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost as though, like, the more marginalized somebody is, the less complicated or flawed they're allowed to be.
Yeah, no, I wanted to, and we should empathize with, you know, him because of his story, not because of necessarily who he is or what he does.
And I just want to touch on the kind of process of bringing the script to screen, because, you know, it's such incredible visuals, the cinematography, it's so epic. The production design is incredible. If you could share a little on, I guess maybe like how you kind of envisaged it as you were writing it compared to like how it's kind of transpired.
It got better. So that's a nice thing, when that happens. No, it was a visual script, and the way that we write is quite technical because we're both filmmakers. So, this is an unedited take until other notice, and this is the lens size, and this is what it looks like. So it's not, it makes for kind of boring reading, but it makes for a good manual. And in order to execute a screenplay like this in 33 days for under $10 million, you have to have a very specific plan, and then you have to stick to that plan. And then you have to have some really great partners. And we had such a wonderful production designer, Judy Becker, and DP Lowell Crawley, and a costume designer. We had really a great team. And our incredible producer, Victoria, as well, our local producer in Hungary. So just having everyone work really tightly together on developing a specific plan, and then you just have to stick with that plan. And then Judy, her visions for the building and for the constructions, the amount of research that she did to find the correct and in a subtle enough way to create the institute was just, I just have to give her so much credit for that, because it was something that I dreamt up with Bria that was quite poetic, but I was worried that it was going to be on the nose, or I don't know, that it was going to be too, too heavy-handed somehow, and I thought she handled it very beautifully. And it was a combination of doing research on the camps and the architecture of that, doing research on architects who did not survive the war and their works, and then looking at, of course, like Marcel Breuer and architects of the period and other brutalist architects. But a combination of that, and then her own sort of vision of things that she dreamt up, is really exciting. See it all come together.
Thank you. Yeah, such an ambitious project and such an incredible film, and obviously so many kind of key collaborations there. Thank you. Yeah, and congratulations again on all of the nominations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you. Lena, I'd love to chat about The Girl with the Needle, as Lena as the writer and originator of the story. I know the story is very loosely based on a true one, so I wonder if we can start there, what that story was, how you came across it, what compelled you to want to retell it, albeit adapt it.
Thank you so much for having me here, and amongst all these extraordinary filmmakers and fantastic films. If people haven't seen them, they should see them all. The story of The Girl with the Needle started with Dagmar, who is the sort of real life character in this. And I read about her in a book that my dad had that was sort of famous. It was called Famous Danish Crime Cases. And she was Denmark's first serial killer, was convicted of killing a number of babies, a kind of horrific crime. But around that, it provoked some social change that was interesting, because in 1924, after she'd been convicted, they introduced a different sort of social care system, so that everybody who was born in Denmark after 1924, and we still have this to this day, would be equipped with this unique identification number, so they couldn't disappear quite as easily. So it was at the back of that case, and also World War I. So I was interested partly in this very dark character, and what had led her to do that, but just as much society around her, really. And the story of the monster, in a way, was less interesting, because if you do the story of the monster, you kind of look away from what creates the monster. And then I met Lone Scherfy, who's a director, but who also had a production company at the time, Creative Alliance. and told her about the story. And she thought it could be something that her company might want to do, not for her to direct. It was a bit too dark, she said, but there might be other directors who'd be good for it. And then, yeah, via her and her producer, I was introduced to Magnus, and we started collaborating on this.
And it wasn't too dark for him.
No, it wasn't too dark for him, and the producer had been looking for a project for him for a while, and he'd said he was interested in doing horror. But I think we were both interested in a story that wasn't the, I guess you could say, traditional horror, if there is such a thing as traditional horror, but something that was more about, there's so much horror in the story itself that it didn't necessarily need to be that graphic. And you know, our imagination does the rest anyway. But it was more about the sort of dark corners of the human mind. But also really about finding humanity in these characters that are kind of forced to do dark things by the society around them. So we did a lot of research. I did a lot of research you know, the first couple of years, not because we wanted to do a biopic of Dagmar's life or the women around her, but we wanted to understand, you know, the society they lived in. And Copenhagen didn't look the way it does today. If you were poor, you were really poor. So yeah, there was lots to kind of investigate around that was felt important as well. And then of course, I guess a little bit like what Mona was talking about as well, real life kind of overtook us a little bit. And I guess we know that history is not a straight line, sadly. Just because we've gained rights doesn't mean to say they can't be taken away from us, but there were certain things that happened along the way that suddenly became. Magnus lives in Poland, and obviously their abortion laws changed whilst we were developing it. Ireland, fortunately, went the other way, and the 8th was repealed, but obviously now we're seeing what's happening in the US as well. So suddenly some of the themes that we were talking about and that people had been asking us at the beginning, why is this film relevant? Why is this story relevant? You know, the answer sort of became apparent as we were developing it.
And I guess as with Mona, I want to ask about the kind of translation to, you know, to screen, and kind of how you sort of imagined this film visually as you wrote it. You know, you said you didn't lean too much into the kind of horror tropes on kind of on screen, because as you say, the horror is kind of in the story. You used the phrase kind of dark corners of people's minds, which is like almost maybe how I would describe the film visually. Yeah, there's, you know, there's a kind of darkness to it, there's a kind of gothic to the look. And yeah, I wonder if you could speak to how you kind of visualized it as you wrote it.
I mean, I will say, like Mona said, it became even more extraordinary than I could have imagined it. And I didn't know, it wasn't that we discussed from the beginning that it would be black and white. That kind of became apparent maybe halfway through. But I think maybe it was sort of inbuilt in the process in terms of what we were looking at. You know, early Fritz Lang, and you know, Polish cinema for sure, and also I guess early Dreyer, and but also that we looked at films like Picnic at Hanging Rock, although they're in color, but it's a different kind of horror story, and there's a different way of also using sound and music. We talked about sound and music a lot, and I think that's also something that plays a really key part in the film. There's a fantastic score by a first-time film composer, Frederica, who also plays under the name Pussa Mary and does this sort of very electronic kind of noise kind of music. And that really helps as well. It kind of, I think, pulls the story into the 21st century in a way and makes that bridge. So so there were things that emerged, and that were obviously Magnus's decision and not mine, but that I think in what we were looking at in terms of how important sound was in the soundscape and so on, meant that that when they started shooting it, it felt like that this was the film. You know, sometimes you're surprised, but I don't think I was with this.
And before I let you go, Lena, I just want to ask about, or rather want to ask you to kind of share with everyone a bit about the work that you do at Raising Films. You do such amazing, important work in terms of supporting parents and carers in the film industry.
Yeah, so Raising Films was an organisation that was started 10 years ago, so we have our 10th anniversary now. We're a little bit more low-key these days. There are thankfully a lot of other great organisations that also do this work, but we were a small group of filmmakers, writers, directors, producers, women and non-binary filmmakers who came together. We didn't all have children, but we all knew about caring responsibilities and kind of very keenly felt how that impacted who got to tell the stories that we see up on the screen. And so we were started with that purpose, to try and address that issue. And by running both workshops for people who'd kind of fallen out of the industry because of caring responsibilities, but also carrying out research and reports to prove, because we all know data sometimes is needed to make people understand that there are problems. So yeah, that's in short kind of what we have been doing. I think the industry is getting better, but we're not there yet.
Thanks, Lena. Thank you. Andrea, I'd love to chat about Love Lies Bleeding. And congratulations.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much.
Such a brilliant film. You've had such incredible critical box office success so far, as well as the BAFTA nomination. My question is honestly, like, was it as much fun to make as it looks like it might have been fun to make?
Yeah, I mean, it was a total adventure. So there was a lot of the same team that had worked together on St. Maud on it, and it came about, as Rose will say, as a response to the kind of constant conversation about strong women, you know, strong female characters, and it was a kind of riposte to that, as a kind of, you know, well, here you go, this is a strong female character, and taking that to extremes. In the very, very earliest phases, being talked about as maybe Glasgow, maybe some sort of, you know, small town in the UK, and then, but it became very clear pretty early on that it was clearly an American setting that was in the DNA of the project, and it was very much inheriting a lot of kind of classic film tropes and a lot of film influences. So pretty early on, it was set in the Southwest, and we settled on Albuquerque. And yeah, you know, as you do when you make a film, sort of all moved over there, and you set up like a circus in this new crazy town on Route 66. And were totally embraced by the local community and film crews there, and worked with a majority local New Mexico crew. And then all the post-production came back to the UK and was mainly taking place in London. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, there's producers that like the development bit and the other phases of it. I mean, I genuinely just love being on set and like being in trailer parks, and you know, like that sense of just rolling into town and putting something on, and you know, such a terrific ensemble of cast. Kristen Stewart, you know, particularly as our sort of number one. Just, you know, they always say that movies are set from the top down, you know, in terms of the tone of the floor, and Kristen is just rolling up her sleeves and getting in there, and wants to sort of, doesn't want any fuss, and you know, wants to be part of the crew and hanging out, and just tries to live a very ordinary life within her kind of crazy level of fame. So yeah, it was a blast.
Rolling up our sleeves to hear, right?
Yeah, we all did a bit of that.
I know you're a producer who likes to roll your sleeves up on set, but I just want to take things back a bit to the process of getting the film funded and off the ground, because it feels fairly seldom that women are trusted with the kinds of budgets that are required to make genre films and the kind of high octane kind of films like this. Obviously, Rose Glass has made a horror film previously, albeit a fairly low budget. Yeah, I wonder if you can share with us a bit about yeah, I guess about how that kind of trust was gained to get the kind of level of support and investment to create a project as big as this.
Yeah. I mean, certainly St. Maud was kind of one of those films that did kind of take off. You know, you know, that really was a sort of charmed existence, and it you know, the only real kind of driving into a wall that happened was when the pandemic hit, and we were 2 weeks away from having a 2,000 screen release in the US. But we felt very fortunate that we'd already done our marketing, done our first festival, got our heads above the parapet. So, you know, the kind of really tricky thing of kind of getting your film known about, we'd gone through those phases when it hit, and, you know, which wasn't the case for other people who really did find themselves with nowhere to kind of put their work after years of hard work, and, you know, due to the pandemic. So it was definitely one of those ones where, you know, you see it sometimes, people are just someone that people want to work with, you know. And the genre thing's interesting, actually, because I know Rose didn't want to be typecast as a sort of horror director, and sort of, you know, this was a deliberate move to kind of keep a very, you know, she is just has a style and a sort of, you can see the through line, but it's not horror, it's a crime thriller with this love story beating at the heart of it all.
With a little bit of action thrown in, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need a bit of action in the crime thriller, yeah. So definitely that. So, you know, stuntsy and sort of lots of new things, particularly for her. I mean, I've worked on a mixture of kind of bigger and smaller films. So I think for me personally, it was kind of, and I was working with Oliver Kasman, who I worked with on a few projects. But, you know, I'd done an Apple show prior, you know, The Essex Serpent, which was a much bigger budget than Love Lies Bleeding, and, you know, and smaller things. And so I've always sort of bobbed around in different scale. I think there is a certain kind of second guessing that goes on, particularly in the UK industry, where filmmakers, including female filmmakers, but not exclusively so, can sometimes feel like they have to make the smaller one because that's what's expected of them, and that's what's kind of the easier thing to get made. And you certainly have to look to the US mainly. Some, you know, you can do it via Europe, but you have to look outside the UK pretty much if you want to get above a certain budget level. It's very hard to do films of scale purely out of the UK, with a few notable exceptions. You know, but even when you get films, I mean, I've had a case in where, you know, I've had filmmakers pitching to me who've kind of done huge TV shows, and then they pitch their movie to you and it's sort of tiny, and you're like, but why? You know, like, you could, and it, again, it's that feeling that you're sort of not allowed in some way. There's probably some gender thing in there somewhere, you know, like, I hate making these sort of, you know, sweeping generalizations, but you know, I always find and say to people, I don't think it's necessarily harder making a bigger film than it is a smaller film. You know, you're just talking to different people and a different circuit, and, you know, provided the material attracts the kind of ingredients that you need to be a bigger film, you know, which has to be cast, it has to have some sort of more commercial or genre thing, unless you happen to be Luca, you know. I think perhaps that's something we do need a little bit more of in the UK, is just thinking bigger and bolder, and things that are going to kind of jump out and reach the international stage.
And perhaps a kind of reappraising also from you know, the kind of commissioners of what constitutes risk right?
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, although I'm sure if you ask them, I mean, like, you know, I'm having a conversation at the moment with one of the public funders or you know, part public funders, and you know, there's a real kind of why, you know, wanting horror, for instance, specifically.
Yeah.
And why isn't that stuff coming? And even, you know, I'm someone that does produce horror, and very often the stuff that I get pitched is sort of spooky or a bit creepy or kind of folk horror, or kind of like I almost never get pitched proper horror, even in the kind of artier, long legsy kind of, you know, the monkey type of vein, but, you know, let alone a sort of smile type project. So again, I think it is partly stuff here which feels like it's, you know, there's a very grand tradition of doing social drama in the UK, and a sort of people write what they see getting made and pitch what they see getting made, and it becomes self-fulfilling. Whereas actually, I genuinely don't think that there's that many projects trying out there to make sort of bigger action films or proper thrillers or proper horrors.
Yeah, I think that's been a really exciting development to see a kind of drive to back films with kind of genre tropes or elements.
I mean, if you speak to the sales agents, I mean, they all say exactly the same thing at the moment, is like, you know, that is what they are ideally looking for. It's very, very difficult to make pure drama, which is not to say that there isn't wonderful drama being made and shouldn't be made, but it's very difficult to make above a very, very kind of small level. You know, you really are kind of having to hit the jackpot and kind of make both exceptional work and one that kind of just gets picked up by the right people if to go down that route. So yeah, I think there's a lot of interest in trying to do genre, and perhaps just not yet quite enough understanding of what that really means. And, you know, you have to go kind of 2 feet in rather than just put one toe in.
Yeah, thank you. There was, sorry, just to finish on Love Lies Bleeding, I wonder if there was anything that resonated more with what Mona said about creating characters that are flawed, because Kristen's and Katie O'Brien's characters are, I mean, they're hugely likable, they're adorable, but they are also constantly putting a step wrong.
Yeah. I mean, we love that about them. I mean, it definitely puts you into a certain bracket of filmmaking for sure, but which is a happy bracket for as far as I'm concerned. But it's yeah, but even that, we did have a lot of discussion on Love Lies Bleeding about making sure the audience really rooted for them at the end, because in our story, they come together explosively. It's this kind of immediate, passionate relationship. And then the story takes them apart for quite a long time. You know, as soon as, you know, the bodies start piling up, they're actually separated on screen for quite a long swathe. And so we really did want to have that feeling at the end of the movie that it is like a Wild at Heart or a, you know, a sort of Bonnie and Clyde, that even though these characters are flawed, that they're sort of perfect for each other. You know, that it should be a cheer from the audience, not a kind of like, oh my God, maybe they're better off apart. You know, like they seem a bit of trouble together. So I think you still have to kind of deliver certain things to an audience, but that doesn't mean you can't make these people flawed and therefore human and therefore more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As if there's anything that anybody has said so far that's kind of resonated with your own project, then I really welcome you to kind of speak to each other.
I think the idea of flawed characters, or the question around that, is, I mean, there's certainly something that's come up for us, and I also, when I look around with all these stories in a way, and I think you know, like Mona said, and I think that relates to some of the documentaries as well, that the kind of issue of having to portray an immigrant or the kind of underdog character or whatever it is only in sort of sympathetic terms is problematic and not ultimately that interesting. And you know, The Girl with the Needle has two female characters that are definitely not always sympathetic in different ways, but they are also in different ways just trying to survive. And sometimes that means making unpleasant decisions. And obviously one of them is a particular character, but I think, you know, they're both kind of doing bad things, if you like. But the world is not that black and white. And it's very much about not just sort of putting the blame on the one person, but kind of kind of sort of back to the there, but for the grace of God go I, in a way. And what would you do if you were in the situation of that is interesting and makes for interesting stories, I think.
No, definitely. I'm curious from the documentary makers, actually, because I've done a little bit of documentary, and actually the same sort of questions did come up very much when we were doing work, that sometimes your real life humans do things that actually you're kind of slightly wincing inside, going, that's making you less sympathetic, or they're doing stupid shit. And you know, it's life and they're real people, and you know, you can't intervene in any way. But I'm just curious about that process when you're kind of, you know, you would write some people differently sometimes. Do you ever end up thinking them when you're following over time people as sort of fictional characters, and find they're surprising you in their choices?
For me, for our film, for Porcelain War, because they were holding the camera and they were filming what they were seeing and experiencing, there was no choice but just to allow those things about people to just be in the film, because that's who they are. And we weren't interviewing or working around what they were saying or doing or telling them where to go. And, you know, we just followed them really in a verite way. And I think that the audiences are smart and they know when something's not authentic. And I feel like that's what I love about documentaries, is when we can really just show the human side of a subject that we're following or we're telling their story. I think that's when we all can see something that we didn't know, or learn something that we didn't know, or about people that we didn't know, or they're not in our lives. And it's, you know, it's actually really more like you were saying, it's very interesting when you are seeing something you don't know, or, you know, learning about people that you don't know, and allowing them to just really be vulnerable and be honest and truthful. And it's not always the same thing, you know, when we were talking about, at one point he was talking about guns in the film, and I was having that cringe, like, oh, guns, you know, but that's not up to me to say how we talk about them, because they're using them to defend their lives, and just have to tell the truth and just let it be the truth and put it out there. And audiences, you know, they're smart, they embrace authentic stories, and that's one of the beauties of documentary.
I guess, yeah, I felt like I was always having my own, you have your own expectations challenged, but you're letting your families and your subjects guide the way. So the day that we told this group of fathers their daughters were coming in for a dance, you know, you expect they're going to be like, oh my God, that's amazing. But then it was actually met with a lot of stress and fear. Well, I haven't seen her. She's going to be worried. Will the mom be there? So but those are things what does make it so real. And so you're just always like, wow, like the story is always meandering. So it is challenging to go, you can never know where this arc and where the characters, where everyone's going in like a story perspective. You just have to be challenged and examine and like be okay with all of these pivots and that kind of thing, and just embrace the complexity of everyone. When you think a girl is going to be really sad one day, she's hilarious and, you know, shows you that she's using dance to kind of get out of something. So yeah, it was just a constant like learning and evolving, and I think, you know, collaborating with everyone, curating this whole film.
I'm going to just add that the people, I would say participants and not subjects in this film, daughters, who literally opened up their entire world where they are often shamed, was not flawed at all. What is flawed that actually came out was the systemic discrimination and racial disparities that actually put them in this position.
Yeah.
That's what was showed here. It wasn't the people, it is a system that has not shown up for them in a way for them to win. And that was what was shown in Daughters, because it's insulting to me when people say, oh, you humanize them, you know, but it's also letting me know that you needed a film that way. You
Yeah.
needed a film because even you are thinking as a viewer that these men do not deserve the opportunity to build with their daughters because they made a mistake or made a choice that actually wanted you to see. Even yourself, people come to us and say, you never told us why they were incarcerated, right? Because now I'm going to show you more of why they should not be with their daughters. So it'll be a total different film. But this was to shift the mindset, right? To shift your behavior on how you actually see them and really put a spotlight on the system, a system that is still against people that look like me, right? Because now you're saying they can't even touch their children. Now you don't even have the right to hug your child because you stole a car, right? And because you're in a facility that is supposed to be a correctional facility, I'm going to do even more harm to you so that your rehabilitation will not be successful so that you can come back, right? Because now you do not have the human touch. Now you do not have a relationship. Now you do not have community. That is what's flawed. It is not the people.
No, your film does that incredibly well. Yeah,
Yes.
congratulations on it. It was beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we appreciate our families because this is also a very hard story to tell, not only from the filmmakers when we have to be in front of their disparities every day, and you want to show up and fix it and heal it and correct it, and that's not your role, and you have to have boundaries, right? Healthy boundaries to make sure that you really just empower and provide them resources and a network to know that they are all they actually need. And what this film has also done for our families is encourage them and empower them to not only see themselves as heroes in telling a story that's usually quiet in your home. You know, your teachers don't know how many children, family members are incarcerated. They just think the child has a mental health problem or a learning disability. They don't know that the child is suffering from the lack of love, right? The lack of a parent in the home, because it's not something that is often discussed. And so now we can help these families see that they can have the courage to share these lived experiences and pay it forward. But now, not only do they want to do things better for themselves, they want to also show up for others in their community. And so this story has allowed so many people. My favorite testimonies are people saying, I used to feel like I was the victim. I used to blame myself. But now I understand that this film is healing me and my family members and my community. And that is the power of storytelling, when you can make an impact and walk away, do your own story, and your story is still relevant and still changing people's lives. You have won that. That is the real winner for me. That people have shifted and are better for our world. That's what we want. An American story in DC, but a global issue and a universal story around just loving your family. Right? That's the root of it. When we go out in the world, we send our children out in this world, we hope as parents, because I'm one, that we've done our part. right? But what I do know that's falling apart is this system. And that impacts us everywhere in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you. I'm going to squeeze in a question from somebody watching, if that's okay. And Mona, maybe I'm going to come to you on this, although I think it pertains to a few projects, which is what do you do to keep the faith and or the vast discipline when a project is unfolding over a period of years? Obviously,
Yeah.
many years in the making. I wonder if you've got anything to share on that.
I'm sure everyone shares this experience here, and you know, it's just you just don't have a choice. You cannot stop. That it's not even keeping the faith, because it feels like there's not an option to stop making the movie. So then you just keep at it, even though, you know, you have credit card bills and you know, you just don't nothing is kind of going your direction, but you just, you know, a film will get made if you don't stop making it. And so you just, you know, you're just that kind of person that, you know, they close the window and you know, you climb through under the door, and then they close that, and then you come down the chimney, and you just keep on at it until you eventually make the film. I think that I think almost every film that I've you know made over the last decade has just been very, very difficult. People don't want to finance them, and they're hard to cast because the roles are demanding. So and they're scary. They're scary to say yes to. So it just takes a long time. And I think that it's exciting when I look, you know, seeing, talking to, you know, you guys, the fellow filmmakers here. I think all of these films are so incredibly unique. They're just a singular voice that someone fought for, and of course, like that is no algorithm can say, oh, these are the films that the audience wants, you know, like a murderous Danish period piece, or you know, and who can say like, oh, this is the algorithm, they want this one, you know. But of course, the audiences are incredibly excited to hear these stories because they're a singular specific vision.
I just want to thank you so much for sharing with us your stories behind your films. Thank you, Andrea, Mona, Lena, Angela, Natalie, Paula.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And everyone, please do check out these films if you haven't already. We've been posting in the chat where they're available to watch. I want to thank our partners on this event, Lionsgate, Netflix, Picture House in the US, and Universal. I want to thank everyone for watching at home. And as I said at the beginning, also big news from us tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be launching our 20th anniversary kind of International Women's Day weekend program. So please do sign up to our e-news, follow us on social media at Reclaim the Frame, and we'll share with you our program tomorrow. I also want to thank our captioners again, Joanne and Norma. Thank you so much for helping to make our event accessible. And last but not least, good luck to all of you as nominees, the BAFTAs, the Oscars, and all of the upcoming awards. And all the best in your films reaching the audiences that they deserve. And congratulations on your nominations. Thank you.